So I decorated the sketchbook with just some stickers that I had just floating around left over from kids' science projects.
Hi, I'm Laura, and today I want to share with you my approach to Inktober 2024. I want to share with you the prompts and how I chose to approach each one.
These I've used longer. I've used these since the early 90s. So I've used these for many, many years. And then the Noodler's ink is something all new to me, and this is what I actually picked up this year, especially for Inktober. So I'll tell you what I did, and well, let's just get into it. All right, here we go.
So I love the cover of this sketchbook. It really didn't ding too much as I was opening it and closing it as many times as I did. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know that I put the prompt list in the beginning, and I'm glad I did because I referred to it all the time. Also, my color palette that I had mixed specially for this Inktober, but I didn't carry on throughout the rest of the sketchbook like I thought I was going to, but I just did a few illustrations with this. All right, so the first prompt that we come to is backpack. So I found this photo reference on Pinterest. It was a black and white photo, and it immediately grabbed my attention because I thought of backpacks. I immediately thought of school children. So this one, I used the color palette that I created with the Noodler's gray ink. This is the Lexington gray that I chose. And with the outline and colored pencil, I went in and did some washes of the Lexington gray, and then I used this color palette for watercolor over the top of the ink. It really laid down nicely. I was really impressed. It was very transparent over the top of the gray ink washes. Loved it. Okay, prompt 2. This was Discover. Really liked this one. This one again was a black and white photograph from Pinterest, and sketched it out in color pencil. Really went in and loaded up the color with inks and did similar to what I did before with backpack, laid down the tones first, then in over the top of it with washes of watercolor and then colored pencil. I also went back in with some inks to add some more depth to some of the background areas. All these mediums worked really well together. Prompt 3 was boots. And when I thought of boots, I immediately thought of the military and the sweet love story that this black and white photo portrayed. I used a variety of mediums on this, most importantly, the ink, of course, and the watercolor palette that I curated for this. So I used a mop brush. It's a squirrel hair mop brush, and the inks were always in these palettes here, these glass palettes. Thinned down the ink with water to create a wash overlay to give the background a real soft feel to begin with. I used these metal lugs. They used to be used for stamping steel and metals. They were my dad's. And I think they're ideal for giving this page just a little bit of extra vintage flair. So what I did was I took these, I stamped them in a stamp pad. It was just regular black. And I just stamped the numbers 1945 in a repeated pattern across the page. While that was still wet, I went through with the wash over the top just to help kind of blend things together a little bit. So after I stamped the page with the pattern, the 1945 pattern throughout, I drew in the tree and the soldier and his girl and painted using that same palette. I curated all these colors and I layered up my watercolors just like I normally would over the top of the ink washes. Now these colors, most of them are mixed. This one right here, that turquoise, was not. That was pretty much straight out of the tube. I use the back of my paintbrush to draw and push in some lines to create the texture in the trees. Also, I used color pencil and, of course, the fountain pen. Prompt for exotic could be no other than some sort of a circus sideshow. I saw this photograph as well on Pinterest and I had to draw it again. I used a color pencil to sketch it out, and then I went back over it again with a sharper, darker color pencil. So that way I wouldn't lose the line when I painted over the top with the Noodler's ink Sunset Orange. So I painted some washes over the top, kept this one real simple, used a black fountain pen over the top. We had just taken a day trip to Niagara Falls, and this was my 10-year-old son Kelvin at the Niagara Gorge, and we had taken these photographs before we even knew what the prompt was. These binoculars are so iconic and very Niagara Falls. They're the ones you put the quarters in, and you can see all over the Niagara Gorge and over into Canada. I used a turquoise of the Mesa over the top of the drawing. I did a light wash and then I went in with gouache over the top. Now the Winsor & Newton gouache I found layered really, really nice with the Noodler's ink. And then over the top with a micron pen. For me, prompt number 6, Trek, was an easy one to choose. From living in Western New York and the snow we get, the person that I think would trek the very, very most would be the Postman. So this black and white photograph I also found on Pinterest. Again, I sketched it with a Prismacolor pencil so I would not lose any of the detail when I started layering the background washes of ink over the top. So I kind of went a little crazy with being a chemist on this one. I mixed a variety of the different inks that I had to give the background washes some depth and some visual interest. It was interesting to see the way that the permanent white gouache layered on top of the ink. The Winsor & Newton ink mixed with the Noodler's ink created some sort of a barrier at first with the gouache when it was really thinned down. Polar black in my fountain pen and also the Amsterdam copper acrylic ink finished that piece off. So for passport, prompt number 7, this piece was probably the turning point for me, the light bulb moment for creating in this whole entire sketchbook. The inks that I laid down, the combination of the Winsor Newton ink, which you see here, as well as the Noodler's ink underlying over my first drawing, the combination of those with it being wet and taking my Prismacolor pencils and drawing, and I think it was this one that I actually used, the purple, sketching into the wet ink, as you can see here, almost melted as I was laying down these lines, and it became very fluid for me, and it was almost like I was painting but with more precision. I loved this piece just for that fact, and that was so interesting to me to learn to do something like that, to be able to have the freedom to experiment with something like that I'd never used before. The color pencils with the inks, it was always one or the other, or waiting till the ink dried and then using the pencils. So that was a completely new technique for me. The information off this passport I totally made up. I didn't want to use her information from the photo reference that I had used that I found on Pinterest. So that was completely exciting for me. Okay, next one. This one was Hike. Not my favorite piece. I love the way I designed and created the texture up in these mountains. Again, this is a black and white photograph that I found on Pinterest. I love the way I did the texture. Lots of rough techniques with using the ink again with the wet color pencil, or with the color pencil being wet, and also I used the fountain pen again and the bleed proof white along with white gouache I didn't like the way his nose turned out. That was probably the part of it that I really don't like. But the rest of it, great texture. This was a lot of fun. Again, using mixed medium in it. But the nose, yeah. But it's a sketchbook, right? And we're just practicing. So using the Noodler's blue ink in the background, it got really wet. So adding in some of these textures over the top of color pencil and even just with graphite. You could see here using the color pencil over the top of the wet ink really created some neat textures for the rock. So this one, prompt number 9 was sun, and I used the orange, sunset orange as well for the Noodler's ink, as well as the washes of light blue in the sky. I used a lot of color pencil on this piece. I burnished some white over the top of the colors for her dress and also for the shirts that are on the clothesline. Lots of fountain pen, creating lots of branches in the background on these trees. This one here, for Nomadic, I really went crazy with the Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiant Concentrated Color. I wanted this to be bright and bold and very bohemian, like lots of bold color. And I just dropped with a dropper and splashed the colors around using my flat brush, moving colors around, letting it drip. And then I had my fountain pen over the top to create the drawing, as well as using white color pencil, the Prisma color pencil, to go in over the top of her dress, her apron, the enamel ceramic pots, just to pull out some bright areas to call attention to the center. You can see that I'm using like a scumbling technique just to get some smooth textures in. But all in all, I love that one. Next one, 11, is snacks. This one I worked on the day before Halloween, and I finished it on Halloween itself. Perfect subject matter for Halloween. My daughters really, really liked this one. Very retro, very vintage. This was an ad that I replicated for Cracker Jacks, and I used a series of inks muted over the top of the color pencil drawing. I really wanted this to look like it was an aged piece, so I just used the colors that I had and dropped in some darker browns in where the corners are. Then I went in with gouache, my Winsor Newton gouache from my palette, and rendered the rest. All right, number 12 was remote. This one was fun to do as well. What I did was very simply create a border with maybe some sort of like Victorian type border. I just made it up as I went along with the fountain pen using the Noodler's Polar Black ink. Drew that out, and then I went with my mop brush and went over the background with a light wash of the Polar Black ink that was just left over in my glass tray, as well as some Lexington gray that I had left over. Kind of was dipping into both of them. And I had made a complete wash over the top of this whole area. And then I went with the same brush and added in some layers of light blue Noodler's Mesa Blue that I had just left over in my palette. Then I took some of the Winsor Newton concentrated watercolors, added it in some layers of those, took the saran wrap as you saw, scrunched it up, let it dry, and let the saran wrap create some of those rocky textures for me. And then the details, I just added in some gouache and white color pencil. This one was so much fun. I had a lot of great feedback on my short for this one. This was just a scene that I chose for Horizon for prompt 13. This was an old vintage black and white photo, again, that I found on Pinterest. Just making some line work to create that moody English seascape that was out in the harbor. Tipped my paper up, my sketchbook, so the ink ran. I created some light washes in the background, added in some white gouache right here, as well as some bleed-proof white to create some of the reflection on the water. All right, this one was Rome, and I just kept this one super simple. This was all ink. I just used a Prismacolor pencil, sketched out my drawing, went over the drawing again with a series of washes from Noodler's, the sunset orange washes, and then I also added a concentrate on the wooden boxcar itself. And then I just added polar black into my fountain pen and created the line work, some hatching lines, and the wood detail work. This 1948 pictorial guide I used for guidebook, prompt number 15. I actually own this Niagara Falls story guidebook. I purchased it at an antique shop, which is another place you can get a lot of these great photo references or great references to paint from. I painted the background after sketching with the color pencil. I used a mixture of the Noodlers, the light blue and the orange together to create these greens for the drop shadow. I also painted in some of the background with the Noodlers orange, and then the rest of it is gouache. So mostly gouache, but the gouache goes on so well over the top of the ink. It was almost foolproof, but I loved it just the same. Went over a lot of it with the ink pen as well. Okay, this one is Grunge. I thought of an old gas station, small town roadside gas station that has been taken over by life. Old rundown place. I love the car. The car is my absolute favorite in the whole thing. This I used a series of watercolors and a little bit of inks. I used a lot of pen hatch lines throughout this piece. My fountain pen is what I was trying to say. So this was very scratchy, very grungy, very old. Next one, this one is a fun little piece. This one I didn't use too much ink other than the outline. I used my Micron pen as well as my fountain pen for the black details over the top. But the rest is gouache and color pencil. Wanted to make this one look super fun for journal. Again, we're using the vintage theme. She's doing some sort of diction work and correcting with correction tape. And if you're my age or older, you'll understand what all these things are. I love this piece. It was fun. It was like the perfect subject matter for journal for me. So that was fun. Loved this one. So drive, I chose a drive-in. This was a series of photos and inspiration that I found on Pinterest. Each one of these elements is from a different image or a different photo that I found to create like one cohesive design. I used a lot of the Noodler's inks in the background. I actually got a dark royal blue for the background sky and transitioned that down into the looks like greenish area from using the orange. So just playing with the layers and the colors and the way that they mix together. These individual points that come out behind its intermission folks, those I used the Dr. P.H. Martin's. Those were really bright, the liquid concentrate. And I also used a lot of the ink outline work again, and bleed-proof white. Okay, this one for Ridge, this one I also learned a lot from just background sketching in a graphite pencil. And the graphite would smudge across the backdrop to push the building, the city street, the sidewalk, and the trees into the background while adding in color pencil to bring everything in the foreground. So I used a series of these Prismacolor pencils as well as the Amsterdam Gold to make the railing pop. So fun. It was a fun piece. Okay, this one on the left-hand side. So I got the prompts a little bit transposed. I was running out of pages. As you can see, I was only working on one side, the right side of the pages. Realized I didn't have too many pages left, so I had to start using both sides of the sketchbook pages. So actually, prompt 20 is on the left, prompt 21 is on the right. And I used a series of ink for this one to create Uncharted, also some watercolor over the top, as well as color pencil, and my Noodler's fountain pen. So this was a black and white photo I found on Pinterest as well. This side is prompt 21, rhinoceros. I don't normally gravitate towards animals to draw from. Not that I don't love them, but for me, I typically draw people. And I found this vintage photo on Pinterest of this girl riding a rhinoceros, and I absolutely love this one. Inks in the background, a series of washes, and also I put some dark blue, the royal blue, in my fountain pen. Did a lot of hatch work for the rhinoceros. The rest of it is a lot of colored pencil, and it just did some scratch work in the background. I love the way that she came out. I love the way the little girl came out. This was a very fun piece. I feel like I got a lot out of this background. Makes it look very brush-like with smearing in some of that ink in the backdrop. I love taking the paper towel and after I lay on the ink, smearing it around with the paper towel. That to me gives it texture and creates some unique yet subtle areas in the backdrop, also where they're standing, the rhinoceros. Adding in some water drops also created some resistance. So it was a fun, successful piece. Rust was a good one. It took me a little bit to choose because I had so many different images I could use for rust. But because we live near to Buffalo, I thought Bethlehem steel would be like the perfect subject matter. So I just drew out the word rust freehand in iron ore, and I used the blue that I had in my Noodler's, that I had in my fountain pen, just created some scratching in the background, added some water over the top while it was still wet, created like that electric, what do you want to call it? The way that when you put the iron into the fire, how it snaps and sparks, creating something like that, but also with the copper and the gold Amsterdam inks throughout here and adding in some Noodler's ink over the top creates that old vintagey, old ironworks feel to it. Yeah, that was fun. That was experimental for sure. All right, on the right-hand side, I had purchased some acrylic pens, like markers, for camp for prompt number 22. Now, because I'm running out of pages, these were kind of backwards, but nonetheless, prompt number 22 was camp. Lots of Noodler's ink in the background, the sunset orange and the mesa blue mixed together. We got a lot of greens. I also dropped in some greens from the P.H. Martin's over the top. I used the acrylic markers for a lot of the detail over the top. I had never used those before, and those worked really well with the ink. Created some details and some textures in, as well as some bleed-proof white. Next page we have here this lady carrying a lot of suitcases. This I found on Pinterest. I don't know where she's going, but she looked like she was on a fun journey. So she caught my eye. Noodler's ink again in the background, as well as adding in some, I think it's peat from the Winsor Newton line of inks. And using again the acrylic pens that I used on the previous page, worked on the suitcases, had those pop in the foreground. For her outfit, I used the black ink from the Noodler's pen and some washes, creating some detail texture from the previous page into this page with the acrylic pens, lots of different colors, design and details, and color pencil for her hair. This side, same type of thing. I was still into those acrylic pens. I also used my Caran d'Ache water crayons, so the dip crayons that you can get wet and smear around. I played with those on top of the inks. Those worked really well with the inks as well. I find that there isn't anything that can't go over the top of the inks. We have chickens, so I made my little chickens in there, the Buff Orpingtons, and this could have been in my backyard. I don't have a scarecrow, especially one this cute, but just adding in colors and being free with my markings, and just really had fun playing with big, broad strokes of the crayons and the acrylic markers. Very expressive, this one. All right, this one I found again on Pinterest. This was very mod, like mid-century mod. I would maybe say even 60s. So this I thought would be great for camera, an old vintage camera, like a video journalist for Channel 4 Buffalo. I totally made that up. But again, with the inks and the Dr. P.H. Martin's to create some really cool colors on her outfit. And just taking the fountain pen, I had blue in there, then I added in some of the yellowy orange, the sunset, and it created the green inside the fountain pen. So I just kept adding colors and did some line work. This one was for road. I didn't finish this one. It's the only one I did not finish in this sketchbook. However, I kind of like it the way it is. Black and white photograph again. Sketched the photo with colored pencil. Used a series of inks over the top of the Prismacolor pencil. So I sketched it out with this blue real lightly. Then I went over the top again with this color pencil darker, and I filled in some areas as well to give that the boys some texture, to bring out some of the details. And then over the top, a series of those washes in succession, layering up different colors over the top. I was going to go over the top of this even more so with some color pencil maybe, but I didn't end up coming back to it. But I like the way it looks. I like the softness of it, and it really does look like an old photo, and that it had been washed out maybe by the sun or the elements. So I just left it. All right, next one. This one was for Jumbo, prompt number 28. Again, found this photo on Pinterest, and this cracked me up. It was like those quintessential movies you see with the family showcasing their biggest and best and boldest at the county fair. And that's what this lady looked like to me, that she was so happy to show off her ginormous russet potato. From a farm background myself, I can certainly say that your vegetables that you grow are your pride. You put so much effort into them. So again, just letting the fountain pen do its thing. Colors in the background are inks as well. The ink was running out of my pen, so I kept adding in other colors. So the colors were actually mixing within my fountain pen. So they were turning from dark green to the lighter green. Then I went over the top of the potato and the woman herself with these corner soft pastel pencils. I have a handful of them. I have a small set that I use. I find these are lovely and they're great to work with. They went on very nicely over the top of the ink as well. I was able to sketch down the colors and smear them with my finger to create the dress and the potato and bring those forward. A sweet, fun, whimsical piece. All right, this one is interesting. This one came out totally different than what I expected in my head. This one was for Navigator, number 29. I found an old photo again on Pinterest, black and white, and I used some of the details from my location to create this area, this whole scene, some of these nautical weather type map little tidbits. I used the inks and smeared the inks in ways of a turbulent storm, highlighted some of the tops of the wood and the posts. It looks like this photo was from about 1920. So create these turbulence areas using the paper towel to smear the ink in a rough water pattern. I dropped on some yellows from Dr. P.H. Martin's over the top to create just some bursts of sun, make the piece look a bit interesting. I also used the corner soft color pencils again in his face and his arms. He's got an old wooden telescope. Just created some very interesting information. Just the way that he's looking in a turbulent storm. He looks calm, but the storm is obviously turbulent. And having the coordinates for Lake Ontario, I really think made this piece pretty interesting and just tailored it. This was the temperature and the weather as I painted it on that day on December 23rd. Again, I used the corner soft pastels and just pushing in some details, pushing in some marks on the ink. Again, that soft pastel went right up on top of that ink very, very well. All right, next one is violin. This one was a very quick piece. This one I completed along with the next one in the same day, I believe. So this was a black and white photo. I kind of went off of the photo just a little bit and created my own kind of composition with her. I thought this could have been maybe a concert in Germany. She had like an Edwardian style about her. Just the way I just outlined and did some very light, loose detail, added in some Winsor Newton colors that I got. These just came in. I got some new ones within the last week or so before I started painting this. I really wanted to use those, the canary and the blue. Added in a little bit of color within her dress that reflected off of the backdrop, just to kind of make her the importance of it. Like painted some sort of a negative painting, and went over with the violin on the right hand side with the bleed proof white. And of course I sketched the 1897 and her with the fountain pen that I've been using all along. So that was that piece. And that was violin prompt 30. All right, last piece. This one, I think, like I said, I did it the same day. This, I went and used my new granulating watercolors that I had. I used that for my backdrop. Let the granulating watercolors dry. I used some greens, I think the Shire yellow, and I can't remember some of the other granulating colors, but I think I just used the three. Like a sap green color, and looks like a darker brownish. Then when it was dried, I went over the backdrop. I didn't sketch first. I just used my fountain pen. Went in and just did some scratching, like I was there doing some sort of a plein air piece of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And that's what I used for landmark for the very last one. So I just sketched like I was sitting there sketching this cute couple on a little Vespa scooter, and just wanted this to be very expressive, very freeing after all the intense work I did at the beginning of the sketchbook. I wanted the end to be very, very loose and very freeing and very light. So this one was very fun to end the sketchbook, make it a unique piece, and just be very expressive about it. And I really like the granulating watercolors in the background. So the navy blue over the top made it just pop a little bit, and I really, really liked it. Look the way that turned out. So this whole sketchbook took me obviously longer than October. So if I flip back through and I look at each one of these pieces, they are so different and so unique from each other. I really wanted to do different things on each of these pages and really try to play in with learning new techniques and really learning how different mediums worked with ink. So I probably did this sketchbook far different than you did or than you would have done. And I probably will do Inktober again next year with whatever, or I should say this year as I'm filming. The prompts are going to be different, and I will do different techniques. But I learned so much from the very beginning of this sketchbook until the very end. And I think that's like the whole point of this whole exercise, is to really create different things, like this backdrop, the way ink works with graphite, the way ink worked with color pencil, the way the ink worked with other inks from other brands. And I really think that from the time I started this until the end, I grew so much as an artist. And I can honestly say I will use a lot of these techniques moving forward in different applications and in different projects. This to me was a huge growth sketchbook for me. After drawing and painting my whole entire life, through art school and my younger trainings in college, I honestly can say that I learned so much from this, probably an equivalent of several years wrapped into a couple months. And I honestly will do this again and again and again. I think the practice that I got out of this, and maybe the practice you got out of your own experience with Inktober, can supercharge you into taking these prompts and coming up with your own designs and force feeding your creativity and really thinking outside the box. You would have chose something different for each of the prompts than I did. And I think that is the beauty of Inktober. I would take any of these prompts and run with them. I would not change the prompts one bit. And I am just so pleased. Inktober 2024, you did not disappoint me. And this sketchbook will forever be one of those very important sketchbooks for me that I can look back on and say, yeah, I grew so much from this. I hope this inspires you to play around with ink. I hope this inspires you to take on Inktober for yourself. Check out some new inks like these Noodler inks. Mix them with Winsor Newton inks. Mix them with colored pencils and fountain pens and acrylic ink. And just play around and have some fun. I think that you will see your artwork fly and be like super creative, and don't be afraid to put things together that you wouldn't normally put together. I did that in this sketchbook, and boy, I'm telling you, I will not regret it one bit. And I think that it would inspire you to do the same thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got a lot out of it, and let me know in the comments if you've used these techniques. If you've used Noodler's ink before, what did you get out of it? What is your favorite inks to use? I'd love to hear back from you. See you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, if you're interested in learning more about how gouache and Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid radiant watercolors work together, check out this video right here.